Today we will walk through the complete life cycle of forensic DNA profiling, from collection at the scene to laboratory processing to statistical interpretation in court. Our focus is not only on laboratory technique, but how results are translated into legally meaningful conclusions under the rule on DNA evidence. DNA profiling identifies individuals using short tandem repeats or STR markers. Its applications include forensic identification, paternity testing, and disaster victim identification. In the Philippines, admissibility and interpretation are governed by Administrative Matter Number 06-11-5 SC, the Rule on DNA Evidence, which requires scientific reliability and proper statistical explanation. The DNA workflow consists of six major stages: collection, extraction, quantification, amplification, separation, and detection, including profile generation. Each step depends on the integrity of the previous one. A failure at any stage may weaken evidentiary value. DNA can be obtained from blood, saliva, semen, hair with roots, buccal swabs, and even non-traditional sources like cigarette butts and bones. The key forensic principles here are chain of custody and contamination prevention. If collection is flawed, the strongest laboratory science cannot repair it. This slide visually illustrates two common sources: blood stain collection at the scene and buccal swabbing. Notice the use of gloves, sterile instruments, and controlled procedures. These practices preserve sample integrity and protect admissibility. Extraction isolates pure DNA from cells. Methods include organic extraction, Chelex, and silica-based techniques. The goal is to obtain clean, intact DNA while preventing degradation and contamination. This diagram shows the silica-based extraction process: binding DNA, washing away impurities, eluting purified DNA, and storing it properly. Each step removes inhibitors that could interfere with PCR. Before amplification, we measure the amount and quality of DNA. qPCR is considered the gold standard because it measures amplifiable DNA. Proper quantification prevents allele dropout from too little DNA or artifacts from too much DNA. This image illustrates how qPCR works, amplifying DNA while measuring fluorescence in real time. The result tells us whether we have sufficient usable DNA for reliable STR analysis. PCR makes millions of copies of specific STR regions. It involves denaturation, annealing, and extension cycles. Multiplex PCR allows simultaneous amplification of many loci in a single reaction. This diagram visually represents the three PCR stages: strand separation, primer binding, and extension. Through repeated cycles, small quantities of DNA become detectable. After amplification, capillary electrophoresis separates DNA fragments by size. Fluorescent labels allow a detector to record signals as peaks. These peaks form the basis of allele identification. The image shows DNA fragments migrating through a capillary toward a detector. The laser excites fluorescent tags, generating measurable signals. The electropherogram displays peaks corresponding to alleles. Each locus has two alleles, one inherited from each parent. This numeric allele calls form the individual's DNA profile. This image shows multicolored peaks. Each peak represents a DNA fragment of a specific size corresponding to an STR allele. Here, peaks are translated into numeric allele values at different loci. Software assists in allele designation, but interpretation remains a human responsibility. This slide shows a full DNA profile across multiple loci. When combined, these loci create a highly discriminating genetic identifier. This table summarizes allele calls across loci. Comparisons are made between crime scene DNA and reference samples. Concordance across many loci strengthens evidentiary value. To interpret a profile statistically, we must understand STR loci, alleles, allele frequencies, genotype frequencies, random match probability, and likelihood ratios. This is where biology meets probability. STRs are short DNA sequences repeated in tandem. They are highly variable and located in non-coding regions, making them ideal forensic markers. This table lists common analyzed STR loci and their chromosomal locations. These standardized loci allow compatibility with international databases. This slide explains IUPAC ambiguity codes and variations in STR motifs. Understanding repeat structures is essential for correct allele designation. STRs are inherited, one allele from each parent. Their variability provides discrimination power in identity testing. So this diagram shows the double helix structure of DNA. STR analysis focuses on specific repeat regions within this structure. STRs are located in introns, which are the non-coding regions of the DNA. Because they do not code for traits, they are suitable for identification without revealing sensitive genetic information. This slide shows inheritance of STR alleles from mother and father. Each individual carries two alleles per locus, forming a genotype. CODIS is called the Combined DNA Index System because it integrates three levels of DNA databases. The first is the local DNA index system, managed by local or city crime labs, stores DNA from cases and local offenders in the United States. Number two, the state DNA index system, where each state gathers and compares profiles from all its local laboratories. And the third level is National DNA Index System, run by the FBI. It connects all states and allows interstate searches. Together, these levels make up the CODIS network. CODIS combines local, state, and national DNA databases into one coordinated system. A locus simply means a location or position on a chromosome. When we talk about STR loci, we are referring to the specific places in the genome where STRs or short tandem repeats are found and analyzed. When we examine a DNA profile, the table lists loci, which are specific regions on the DNA where short tandem repeats or STRs are analyzed. At each locus, an individual has two alleles, as I have said, one inherited from the mother and one from the father. The numbers in the table, for example, 12 and 15, represent the number of repeat units of a specific DNA sequence found at that locus. For example, if the marker D3S1358 shows alleles 15 and 17, this means one chromosome has 15 repeats and the other has 17 repeats at that site. If the same number appears twice, for example, 12 and 12, the individual is homozygous at that locus. If the numbers differ, like for example 12 and then the other is 14, they are heterozygous. By comparing the alleles in a DNA profile table between an evidence sample, that is, a sample taken from the crime scene swab, and a known sample, for example, a suspect or a reference sample, we can determine, number one, either a match, all alleles correspond. Number two is exclusion, one or more alleles are inconsistent. And number three, inclusion with probability, which means alleles are consistent and statistical calculations, the allele frequency, likelihood ratio, probability of paternity, measure how strong the match is. To determine these frequencies, forensic scientists rely on population databases. Samples are collected from a large group of unrelated individuals in a particular population. For example, Filipino population database. Each allele is counted and divided by the total number of alleles observed at that locus. So why is this important? Well, it allows us to calculate the genotype frequency which is the probability of observing a specific pair of alleles in the population. This, in turn, is used to compute the random match probability and likelihood ratios in forensic or paternity cases. Take note of this. Rare alleles strengthen the weight of a DNA match because they are less likely to be shared by chance. Common alleles provide less discrimination power since many people may have them. Using the Hardy-Weinberg principle, genotype probabilities are calculated as p squared or 2 times p times q. These probabilities estimate how common a genotype is. So this example shows how genotype frequencies are computed numerically. Such values are later multiplied across loci. Statistical interpretation uses random match probability and likelihood ratios. This translates laboratory findings into legally meaningful numbers. Random match probability answers: what is the probability that a random unrelated person would share this profile? Lower RMP means stronger evidentiary weight. Here, we multiply genotype frequencies across loci to obtain an overall RMP. This demonstrates how multi-locus profiling dramatically reduces coincidence probability. To improve clarity, random match probability is converted into 1 in X form. This makes interpretation more understandable for courts and juries. Sometimes, it's clearer to express very small probabilities in terms of the complement, which is the chance of not matching. Here's how to convert your RMP of 0.00001053, which is equivalent to more or less 1 in 949,000. This slide models how forensic experts phrase conclusions. We speak in terms of probabilities and support for hypotheses, not guilt or certainty. The likelihood ratio compares prosecution and defense hypotheses. It expresses how much more likely the evidence is under one hypothesis than the other. Likelihood ratio greater than 1 supports prosecution hypothesis. The larger the LR or likelihood ratio, the stronger the evidentiary weight. DNA may show a match, an exclusion, or inconclusive findings. Scientific caution is necessary, especially with degraded samples. The Philippines uses internationally recognized STR loci similar to the United States CODIS systems. However, allele frequency databases are still developing locally. This slide lists key Filipino STR allele frequency studies. These provide population data necessary for valid statistical calculations. These references support both scientific methodology and legal interpretation. Responsible forensic testimony must be grounded in established literature and governing legal standards. End of the presentation.